It is my pleasure to introduce Ronnie Batista, who will serve as our presenter today. First, a big thank you to Ronnie for joining us. Ronnie is a senior executive with 20 years experience visioning and delivering creative and profitable cross-channel interactive experiences with bottom line impact. He is currently the Senior Director and Global Lead of Emerge XD at Slalom Consulting. Ronnie is also a popular instructor with Rutgers Business School Executive Education, teaching in both custom corporate and open enrollment programs such as the Mini MBA, Customer Centric Management. And Ronnie, I know that is a brief introduction. I know you'll tell the audience
Yeah.
much more about you as we go through, but I'm going to hand things over to you now to get started.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for spending lunch with me. First of all, I want to give a big, I got my Rutgers cup here, big RU rah to my extended Rutgers fam. As Margaret mentioned, I actually teach at the school, but I also went to the school. My wife went to the school. My daughter's a junior. My son's a sophomore there. And so I have lots of love and history with the Rutgers family. So I'm really excited to be able to speak with you all today. I also wanted to talk about what you came here for. If you saw this as sort of the advertisement, as a full disclaimer, these are things that I've just been thinking about. Again, I live in this industry, but I think about it all the time, and I really thought about, let's just have a more of a conversation about what this is. So hopefully what you'll see is a bit reflective of what this topic was. But I do want to say, I'm not sure what other webinars you've been to or how those structures are, but this is more of a conversation with some observations, hopefully a little humor here and there, but this is really meant to be just something to really immerse you a bit in more the foundational elements of what design thinking is and the importance of customer empathy. And I'd like to start with COVID, which is probably why, well, webinars usually happen online anyway, but you might have been in this line. I can't even say I can imagine. I know for a fact that every single one of you listening to my voice right now has been impacted by COVID. It has changed the way that we do things. And businesses have always been talking about, we need to change, we need to evolve, we want to get better, we want to innovate. And COVID just poured gasoline on that. Really, the idea of not only should we, but we have to. So if you think about maybe some of the towns you're in, the fact that the local deli by me now takes takeout by phone, and I can literally order a sub from a small place. They've found ways to work with local companies to figure that out. Like this type of thing, the way that we're doing business has changed dramatically. In putting together this presentation, I actually this was something that we created a while back, very much in the earlier stages, in the May timeframe of when COVID had first started. And it's this idea. This is a persona. We're not going to get too deep into that. But it's just the idea of, okay, Tina, we called her Quarantina, right? Quarantina is a shopper. And before COVID, this is how she used to shop, right? But during this environment, during what was happening, and this is back when toilet paper was a problem, think about all of the different ways, the different that she needs to shop, the different needs that she has. And oh, by the way, when we get out of this thing, things like proximity and hygiene, some of those things that we never thought about, we really have to start thinking about. This really ran counter to the general thrust of business, which is, small kind of incremental things happen. COVID really changed the way that businesses realize that they need to kind of get to that next level. So the true silver lining to the COVID pandemic is there has been a tremendous amount of investment. This is a once in a career event. I have never had more asks for coming in and helping us figure out how to work better with people in this environment. So again, as horrible as this has been for us, and it certainly has had a strong impact on me, I'm hating working from home for so long, but we really have unleashed, I think, some very important innovation and thinking about innovation. And, goes without saying, but, humans drive business. No business exists without a customer. And you know, there's a lot of technology out there to solve for it, but one of the big themes here that I want to start with is that customers and employees and anybody, any human beings involved, that's actually what makes it all happen. Again, technology is they're great tools, but really it's all about the people that are driving business. And this is where we start to think about these words that we're using nowadays to describe what that means. And the fact is that we use and often abuse a lot of jargon in business. And I'm going to say, both with this, when we talk about jargon, and a lot of things that we're going to show here is I am not standing on any, I am not holier than thou. We are all a little guilty of a lot of, I think, some of the issues that we're struggling with today in business, and certainly, you know, outside of business. But there is a lot of jargon in the business world, and there's two that I want to kind of unpack a little bit with you today: design thinking and customer empathy. By the way, as Margaret mentioned, certainly throughout this, I'm going to have some pauses. If you have any comments, I'll try to myself kind of manage the, you already put that in there. I'll manage. If you got any questions throughout, please feel free. Again, I'll just keep going, but I'll take some pauses. But I want to talk to you about, why don't we start with design thinking? Does anybody here, and I guess by show of hands, I'm not sure, but like, I'm guessing some of you know of design thinking, or at least have heard of design thinking. And but it is a term that now, especially again, with this renaissance in really thinking about customers and experience, et cetera, it's a bit indiscriminately used today. So I want to try to help you understand, at least from my perspective, of what you really need to think about and and care about, and get past some of that noise. So Tim Brown from IDEO, which is a company that has really been sort of seen as the birth of design thinking. This is, if you were to look on Google or anywhere, this is the sort of official line of what design thinking is as a definition. And I think there's some really important things here, right? It integrates the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. So it's the people, process, technology. It's the the three-legged stool of business. It's exactly what this is. I think the needs of people piece is the part that we really want to focus on today. But I'm not sure if this might sound familiar to your business, but this is how, certainly pre-COVID and certainly in existence a lot today, this is how companies pretty much tackle business problems, right? There's a problem here. This isn't working, or we want to get into this market, or we want to do something. And then a small group of people comes together to find a solution. And then they seek investment, from their company as part of the investments that companies make. They get their piece of that. Then they get some type of project manager that runs that project. And maybe when it actually goes out, we actually communicate to the community and get some change folks out there to help people understand what it is. And then we see what happens. The interesting piece here is when these are happening, the actual people that we are solving these problems for really aren't involved in that process. And what is the impact of that? Again, obviously, less effective solutions. There are certainly many great ideas that come out of business that land well when they go out to the audience, to an audience, but there are ever more. I have examples beyond examples of mobile apps that were developed because a company said they wanted an app, and they just kind of threw money at it as quickly as possible, not really understanding who their end audience was. And sure, they build a product, it works, it looks good, it does all the right things, except it's actually not meeting a need from the people that it's serving. And I'm happy to say that this is not happening nearly as much, but I'm also regretting saying that it's still happening a lot. Okay. And generally, I mean, if you decide in a different way and say, why don't we start from designing for the people that are going to basically inherit? And I use the term inherit because no matter what we build, at some point, you have to give it away. And that's once it's out of the hands of a business into the arms of the customers and employees, that's when you know the ROI of that. That's if it's a great product, but people don't use it, then there's really not much ROI. Or if they don't use all of the features of it, or don't use it how you built it, all of that really depends on a conversation that's happening from day one. and as early as possible, really understanding what folks' lives are like and seeing how your solution can actually plug into those areas, those needs and wants in that person's life. So design thinking, before we actually get into sort of jumping into what it looks like, what are some of the things that when sometimes people think design thinking, again, there's this idea of like it's very creative, right? And there are different ways to use design thinking for huge, like big picture transformational things to solving really, really small problems. Like there's just not something working with this particular part of an app, or getting people inspired to do new different things. So design thinking is a series of things to do. There's not one way to do it. It's really that mindset. And so we'll actually talk about one particular one that I'm very excited about. But they're all really, all of this is actually anchored to one process, right? And it's empathy. And you can't skip that empathy part. This is the official IDEO design thinking methodology. When I say official, it's that, again, and nothing against them, because this is a wonderful series. If executed the way that it's supposed to, it is extremely powerful. And as you'll see, there's sort of 5 steps. The first being empathize, develop a deep understanding of the challenge. I will tell you, generally speaking, when we talk about business, is that first part is the part that really very rarely gets handled, because we know there's a problem, we got to kind of get to it. But getting back to that point of just understanding why is that problem happening, that's the part that often gets skipped. And again, I'll step through a little bit more of another version later on in the interest of time, but effectively, again, and you can read along here, but I'd also like to introduce that this isn't the only way. Ooh, I got somebody's hand raised. Is there a hand raised? Oh.
I did see the hand raised, but I lost track of it.
Okay. Oh, see, no, that's okay. One thing to note here is that this is IDEO's way. And if you look here on the right, you might have heard of things called the double diamond. I mean, you've got IBM's design thinking model. You've got the Google sprint design sprint process, which I'll talk about in a second. But there's just a whole bunch of very different ways of saying essentially the same thing. And it's a lot of noise, again, jargon free with lots of echo. And sometimes people get very precious about one version or another, and they get really specific about it. But I want to cut through that noise with you, because I'm going to ask you a question. This is a process. You ask a question, you do background research, then you construct a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis by doing an experiment. The results of that experiment, you analyze those, you draw some conclusions, you communicate those results, and you repeat to make it better. And there's a little nerd hint here, really super meta nerd hint here about what the answer is. But let me get to it really quick. Yeah, if you haven't guessed, it's called the scientific method. It has actually existed since the Middle Ages, and it's pretty much how we've done science for centuries. It works great. It's really, really powerful. The Bacon reference was Sir Francis Bacon, who actually codified the scientific method back, I believe, in the mid 1500s. But all of this other like new exciting thinking, like all of these names, this is really, it's essentially the scientific method. Okay. And when we look at, here's another, again, Google-based 2002 Encyclopedia Britannica, remember that? It's this idea, again, it's just, you're getting this information, you're going through, you're designing, you're testing all of this stuff again. But when you look at this, a lot of this, again, feels like it's dealing, I should say, there's a lot of thought around that when it deals with like a product, fertilizer, a new phone design, right? But a lot of times the things that we do within this, when we're working on interfaces, on experiences, that the core thing you're solving for might not be a tangible thing. It might be an experience, an incorporeal product. It has to be experienced. So to do that, the only data you can get on that isn't testing a soil sample, it's getting into the mind of a human being. And that's where the madness starts. So this idea, when you think about, again, design thinking, and I've got, like I said, it's easier to put icons on here. These are the sort of mindsets that incorporate companies that have a design thinking methodology. The one that I really want to focus on here, and I'll actually wind up stepping through a bunch of these when I get to design sprints, but it's really this idea of focusing on human values. Again, a very easy thing to say, again, fits easy on an icon, but it's an important piece of it's a foundational piece of why this is different for businesses, because a lot of times, again, the focus is more on the business, what the business wants, what the business needs, how we're going to actually sort of tackle problems that will drive business results, whether that's top line growth, bottom line savings, acquisition of new customers, selling to existing customers. That's kind of where the mindset goes. Whereas this is, if we actually step back and say, okay, what about the people? And use that as a basis, it's just it's a radically different way to think for some companies. And so I decided to have a little fun here. I hope it works, but I wanted to talk to you about, if you are on this call because you're interested in learning more about design thinking, you have some idea or whatnot, and I'd be very, very interested to hear what folks think from their experience. But these are the things. There's some 5 common mistakes about when people talk about design thinking, and I'm going to go through them each here. The first is what I call shiny trinket syndrome. And if you work at a company, and again, all of these, by the way, are examples of sort of some of the situations I've dealt with over the years, and again, over the last couple of weeks, right? Where sometimes in a company, you'll get a new person that comes in, they probably call themselves a digital strategist, and they read an article or they got a TED talk, and they're like, hey, we need design thinking, or we're going to need this new thing to come in and change the company. And then effectively, they kind of double down on that because they hear that's the new cutting edge way to do that. And then before long, it doesn't really, like, it actually gets a little bit of traction, but then something else comes along and another cool thing. Actually, we don't want to go this way. We want to do this new version of Agile because that's faster than that. And before you know it, it's just sort of a series of that happening. The other is design thinking is not magical. I've heard this before. Oh yeah, no, we did a design thinking workshop. It was fun, but it didn't work. You'll hear this repeated throughout, but again, one of those, I'm trying to hammer in some very common messages, but like a design thinking workshop, a design thinking project is an absolute great way to start a move towards the next level, but it is not inherently transformational. Anybody can do one workshop. Some workshops are really effective and powerful with a good facilitator. Some, quite frankly, are just people that come in with jazz hands and get you to dream out loud on things. Regardless, either one, when I say that's easy to do, that's easy to be done, but to be able to do this consistently, be able to incorporate it into the fabric of how you do business, of your project life cycles, takes a lot of practice and patient rabbit. It's not a lifeboat. This is another one where, there is some problem, right? And effectively, this is the one that kind of made me think about COVID a little bit, in the sense of, I think it started the move towards more regimented ways to do this, but this is kind of where people felt they had to jump. Andrea has her hand raised. Hi, Andrea. Is there a question?
Go ahead, Andrea. You can unmute yourself and ask your question if you'd like.
I think I pressed the wrong thing.
Oh, so you didn't mean to raise your hand? That's okay.
No worries. Welcome to technology. It's fun. Margaret and I had a lot of fun just trying to get this set up, so no worries. And again, it's just this idea that it's not something this is not something to grab and throw at something, throw a lot of money at it and a lot of time. It effectively, it's got to be ingrained in the culture. It's not going to save you. It's not going to. The next is lack of persistence. And I know, especially in teaching the EMBA program, I talk to a lot of folks in that program that are currently working at major corporations, and they talk about this all the time. Yeah, we had that customer first thing in 2004, and then there was a whole posters in the kitchen saying the customer comes first in 2011, and then that thing last year where we did some innovation offsite thing, and basically, again, it's a little bit like that shiny trinket syndrome in a bit of a different way, in that it's more of a corporate level where they're saying this is what we believe in, but they never really follow through. They think it's a project and not a program. and the research piece that goes into this, the real understanding of going out and doing research, doing observations, and figuring out what it's really like to navigate a shopping center during COVID. These are types of things that are often seen, I should say, as a nice to have. And when we talk about persistence, the equivalent here is, and I just had to include, is WD-40. Kind of interesting side note, WD-40 is the name of the attempt to create a water displacement spray lubricant. So this is literally, WD-40 is the 40th attempt when they finally cracked the code on it. But 39 times before that, they had to keep doing the same thing again, and again. And organizations sometimes just don't have the appetite for that. And that's because culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is the last one I wanted to kind of poke at, but I think it's very hard to argue that, like, I totally get it, but that's just not the way our company thinks. We should be doing this, right? This is, to me, one of the most honest answers. But design thinking is again, it's a skill and a mindset. But if your culture just is not aligned to that, it's not going to work. It really requires that an organization at the highest levels investing in saying, we need to all change to get there. This is an extremely easy slide to put together. It is a lot of work to do this, but it's being done. And more so in this, again, the last 12, 18 months have been the most inspiring for me, having done this for a long time, that people are finally starting to get, we can't stop saying, we can't keep going with, this is how we've always done it. And the other thing, again, to sort of tie that is because there's a difference, right? In the past, there's this, actually, I got this this from another website, but what's interesting is design thinking, again, is sometimes used as it's a thing that you put at it. But this method is powered by an empathy mindset, a human-centered design mindset. It's all about that empathy that you need. You can't do any of this without having, again, that solid belief and investment in saying, we are going to continually spend time working, understanding, and iterating with our customers to understand what they need. And that, again, customer could be anybody, employees, anybody that basically is part of your business fabric. I'm going to pause there. Margaret, I promised you I'd pause. Any questions at this point?
I've been encouraging our audience to ask questions, and I did let them know, gave them a hint that we would allow them to verbally ask their questions, but they're being a little bit shy today.
That's okay. They're
oh,
eating.
Wait a second. Somebody
Oh.
just stepped up. Somebody stepped up. I'm going to
Jose.
unmute Jose. So Jose, unmute yourself and tell us what your question is.
Jose?
So it's a two-step process, just for everybody's benefit. I have to allow you to unmute, and then you have to unmute yourself to actually ask the question. There we go. Go ahead, Jose.
Sorry, I actually didn't mean to unmute myself. I was just carefully listening.
Okay. All right. No
Yep.
problem. We did, in the meantime, get another question that came in.
What
and it's,
are the, yeah, I see it. Actually, you know what? Your timing is absolutely perfect, because I'm about to jump into that right now. About kind of what is their scientific process rooted design thinking. I think the Google one that we're going to jump into in a second, we'll get to that. Because what I want to do is at least give you, oh, there are some other raised hands.
go ahead and unmute yourself, Frank.
Hi there.
Hi, Frank.
So the question I have for you is, earlier on in my career, I was in the consumer packaged goods industry, and before launching any products, there was just a lot of heavy duty market research that was done. You typically start with a focus group to understand the issues, and then you do more statistical testing, and then you might even create a test product, and put it in households and get results, how the consumer responded to it. And do a test market even. I mean, you'd be testing very, very rigorously to ensure the product was a success. And quite frankly, even sometimes when you did all that testing, it wasn't a success, but a lot of times it was. And so the question I have is, it certainly was a mindset in the corporations that I worked for in the consumer packaged goods industry. Would that, and this is going back several years potentially before the term design thinking came up, would that be an example of design thinking either in its precursory years or maybe just before the nomenclature came about, or is that something different?
That is a great question, Frank. Thank you so much for asking. And what I will tell you is that is this, I think you're absolutely right. That is what I would call that is, again, when you even see here, that's human-centered. This is all effectively human-centered design. So whether you call it audience design thinking, user experience design, customer experience, it's that idea of saying we are going to be engaging directly with consumers in this process to learn and iterate with them. That's basically what that human-centered design thing is. And the parts of the organization that you worked in that probably successfully launched better products doing that, knew that what they were putting on the shelf was going to work better because they've actually kind of gone through that. That's human-centered design.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
And we have one other question that came into Q&A, Ronnie.
Sure.
What is your opinion of L6? Layer 6 down from the top. Frontline workers may have the answer to problems. How can they be incorporated into the process?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm not familiar actually with the term layer 6. I will certainly do some research on that later on. Here's the funny thing. If we're talking about it, if this is sort of in the context, Martin, of like, if you want to find out where your company is failing, talk to the customer service reps, like that's where they're going to know a lot about that. The issue that I would always say is, once again, like the employees are having their own experience, hearing what's working and what's working and not working. They're having a good and bad experience answering those phone lines. But even if they tell you what the customer's problems are, they are not the customer. They are a good proxy to give you some ideas. But what they say is people hate this part of the process. People don't like this product. People are returning this because of X. There is also the step of saying you definitely want to get the people that are interacting directly with your customers 100% are invaluable, but they cannot be done with, you still want to make sure that you're engaging directly. So both of them, I think, are providing good input. I hope that answered the question. And what I'll do is, actually, we're sort of halfway through here, so I think I'm actually I'm pretty good on time. And I also wanted to say, like, a lot of this isn't to scare you, like about, some of the challenges here, because things are really starting to change. We're really witnessing the dawn of big things. I have to tell you my favorite, and those of you that have heard of this, and what's really awesome is, as opposed to 10 years ago when I was teaching at Rutgers, and I'm like, have you heard of this and this? People like, I have no idea. I was at a lunch where a client, an IT client, had this, literally brought it to the table with him because he was reading it. And I had already been familiar with Google Design Sprints, but I was so excited that he basically was already saying, this is how we need to do something different. And let me explain what a design sprint is, which is it's a type of design thinking methodology that's used in certain circumstances. There's certain, like, this works very well when you are sort of close on an idea. This doesn't work as well if you're like total big, crazy big picture. But there's certain types of activities with design thinking that work with different parts of the process. Design sprints is really good when you have an idea for, when you're nailing down, we want a mobile app that helps people schedule doctor's appointments. And that's kind of what we know. Like, that's a good one to jump into to sort of mock something up. So let me show you how that works. It basically, this one in particular is a 5-day process, which again goes from, and I'll show you on the next page, but it's the idea that it's the scientific method in a box. One of the big reasons that I found this to be an extremely compelling methodology is that it's only a week long. And that for many of our, people in business that they look at a research project and they think that's too long. It's bite-sized and they can do it. And once teams do it, it gets pretty addictive. I will say again, though, this is all of these are, again, versions of, even how we talk about things like design sprints. Slalom, like I said, present company included, this is how we talk about it on the bottom. We have different versions, and this is what we call it, right? A typical 5-day project. And again, I won't go deep into this. That's a whole nother section that a whole nother hour I can spend on walking through design sprints. If you don't know what they are, I would highly suggest go out there and take a look about what they are. There's plenty of material out there and they're really powerful. First day is just sit down as a group and you make sure you're surrounded with people within the business. You have to have dedicated time from business leaders across business, IT, marketing, product, to basically sit in a room together and talk about, understand the problem, maybe even bring a customer in and say, hey, so, this is what we've been doing. Really listen, define what it is, understand what they are, just getting down, what are we trying to solve for? Then the next day is exercises, interesting ones, crazy eights, they're called, where you sketch a whole bunch of things. It's a very super interactive day, but it's the idea to get a bunch of ideas out there. And then on the third day, you basically start to, you interrogate each of these and you get them down to something that feels like, okay, here's something that we can create as a prototype, as a product, as a fake mobile app, so to speak. On the Thursday, you actually go and you mock up something. Maybe it could be like a black and white thing, but it's something that you can go out to people and say, hey, look, we just spent the week talking about, maybe ways that we can help patients schedule appointments. This is what we came up with. Give us some feedback on it. And one of the great parts about a design sprint is, I can tell you that there are major corporations in New Jersey that have spent $9 million on an app that when it launched in the web store, it was an absolute failure. I think it got like 4 downloads and everybody hated it. And they never actually, if they just did this process in 1 week, a good answer coming out of design thinking is, you know what, we thought it was a great idea, but it clearly our customers didn't feel the same way we did. So what you walk away with is 1 week of effort versus starting again a 3 to 6 to 12 month development cycle only to find out at the end. So that it's in terms of what I've seen in design thinking be the most impactful, it's design sprints. And oh, guess what? And this is where I'm hoping this resonates, but we have done so many remote design sprints now. They are so powerful in person. I cannot wait. It really is. There's a lot of power in that dynamic being together, but it's really hard to do that during an environment where we're not actually allowed to be together. But we found ways using tools like Miro, Jamboard, Mural, to basically, these are online tools that can allow us via this device to still do some of those activities together. And so it kind of looks something like this, where you can bring people, and in the middle there, you see there's all these kinds of things. And I know what you're saying. You're like, oh, cool. So Ronnie's telling me that I get to see more people and I get to see more meetings and I get to have more people staring at me, staring at this laptop as I stare at this webinar. Yay. And then we can have a Zoom happy hour afterward. Anybody want to go to another Zoom happy hour? I don't know about you. I'm just ready. Maybe not, because what I'd actually rather do is spend more time on social media, rolling my eyes at that guy I graduated high school with that posts the most inane crap that drives me crazy, and forget it. I got to get off social media. I'm going to just go to the news and I'm going to doom scroll so I can see all the great stuff happening in the world, with the divisiveness, with the conflict, with the COVID epidemic. And it's just, I'm having so much fun. I got to get out of the house. Maybe I should go shopping. Well, shopping now seems to be a fun place today to have some conflict as well. So you know what? Maybe I should just get something to eat. And in this case, talk about the last straw is, you have people that are at a point in time, given the environment that we're in, that are literally, we are all sort of losing it a bit, right? So I think we should all just get on a plane and get away. And I don't know about, I don't know if any of this resonates with you, but I thought this pandemic was over. Why is this so hard? And I don't know, I need a little empathy here, right? Now, I'm guessing, in trying to be a bit funny here that like, if any of that you were like shaking your head, yeah, that's because we are fortunate in the one hand to be in a situation where, we have access to all of these things and we're experiencing this together. We're experiencing this alone together. And there's empathy that comes from that. And when we talk about customer empathy, again, that's where I also want to make sure that we understand that there's a big difference between talking about it and really understanding and internalizing what it means. Because right now it's a term, again, we want to engage customers. We want to, we love our customers, but empathy, real empathy, is something that is a little deeper and requires a lot more courage to really get behind if you're going to make a change in business.
So Ronnie, we had a comment and a question come in.
Sure.
Right about that.
Which is a perfect time for this slide we were going to pause on. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So Martin said, returning to the COVID impact, the hospitality, travel, leisure industry, especially, is having huge financial challenges. And there's much evidence of empathy, such as flexibility in changing ticket travel dates, refunds, but there's also some less than empathetic policies, use it or lose it type of things. And what would you say to companies that are following some of those unempathetic policies and procedures, but who defend them because they're losing money?
That's a phenomenal question. That is a phenomenal question. And, it's one thing to be like, you can be the most empathetic company in the world and have to shutter your doors because by giving everybody X, Y, or Z, like you effectively, I can tell you, I know someone that runs conferences that had to be canceled, and he had, and so a lot of money was lost in the venues or whatnot. And like, so now people are like, well, we want our money back, and we want, but that money was already put into, into facilities. So he's had to kind of find that balance of, how do I can't give everybody's money back, but on the flip side, how do I do that? There's really no right way to do it, but it's funny. I just love the fact that you're asking the question goes back to those companies and saying, are you asking that question? Are you truly thinking, look, I can give you refunds. I know but like, if you don't do it by X date, like there's got to be that balance. It can't be customer empathy at the expense of forget about business profitability, business viability. If you go out of business providing empathy, that's not a good solution. So you've got to find that balance. And what I think, thank you again for the question, is companies that think about that are the ones that are human centered. So again, there's not a right answer, but finding the best answer, mindful of their business needs and balanced against the customer needs.
That's great. And before we go too far past what you were saying about the design thinking sprints and so forth, we had someone comment in the chat about how familiar that sounded to agile methodology.
Yes, it is. It's similar in the. That said, agile in and of itself, it incorporates extremely well. A lot of times, a design sprint exercise will actually be the output of that will be the feed into an initial sprint, right? The sprint part is more about the development, and it's making sure that once you actually do put put this validated concept into design, that you don't just then throw it away and be like, okay, we talked to 5 people about this, and now we're going to go off in 9 months to build it. So it's still, the agile process needs to incorporate that iteration with customers as well beyond that first instance, because once you keep building, then you're going to be like, okay, we did this. Well, I didn't mean that, I meant that. So yes, it does work with agile, provided, and importantly, that you're still incorporating research into that. To MVP, I can jazz on that all day long, but yes, I mean, you want to get to the point where that MVP should be defined by customers to the extent it can. So in the interest of time, I would poll, and I think I almost want to see if we can get to the end here, but how well do you think, how do you think your company values customer empathy? And you might think on behalf of your customers, things that you've done, but also think about for a second, how well do you think your company has empathy for you? I mean, for those of you, I have to say, I mean, we've all had it a little bit, you know, everybody's had it tough, but parents of small children that went through this pandemic, my wife's a teacher and I've got older, you know, kids, but I can't imagine. I truly, I can't, I can empathize, but I can't imagine what that must have been like to have to, like, you know, get your children online, all of that. And how was your company treated you? Were they kind? Were they saying, look, do what you need to do, take your time? All of these types of things you can start to, if you ever want to see how empathetic your customer is, again, it's starting with how are they treating you? And are they treating you any differently? This isn't a trick question, because the idea is also, is especially for those of you that have frontline interactions with actual customers, is the way that you're treated is the way that, you know, how you're treated shows up in how you treat others. And I'm going to get into that in a second to say, like, here. Okay. So imagine this is what the person says. So you're calling a customer service line and you're waiting, and it says, you know, every 45 seconds, your call is very important to us. Please hang on, and the next agent will be with you as shortly as possible. If you hang up the phone, you're going to lose your place in line, right? And you start to get this feeling like, really, if I was that important, like, you know, you'd actually like have some time for me. And then, as my last name is Battista, it's not the hardest name to say, but then you get, I'm sorry for the wait, Mr. My name is Mary, and for quality purposes, I'm speaking with you on a recorded line. My job is to provide excellent service. To best expedite your request, may I please have your account number? Now, I have to think that everybody here has been on some version of this. And again, this person is the face that I've had because I've been getting the emails, I've been going online and not able to log in for this and that. So this is the only way that I can have a conversation with this company. And I'm talking to one person that has done that. That's a tough situation. Now, what I'm going to do here is give you an example of the call center rep that answers, right? That woman, Mary, right? She's in a grossly understaffed office that has massive call queues 24/7. Not her fault. Her company's basically like, we want people to use the website, so we're only going to hire a handful of people to handle calls so we can, like, you know, officially cover that. But effectively, so it's really not up to her. And this particular day, she's having, like, it's just like one after the other that's just, you know, giving her a load of grief. And, you know, right before my call, a school alert basically tells her she's got a COVID outbreak at school again. She's got to go find a way to pick up the kids. And at this point, she's got nobody to help with childcare. Okay, so that was Mary, the one that mispronounced my name, and I was pretty annoyed with after talking for a long time. And guess what? After I'm done hanging up with Mary, the man on hold, actually a really kind person, and he's normally not this irate, but this is insane. I mean, he is working two jobs. On the little off time he has, he's got to go in and solve some random account administrative that wasn't even his problem because this company kind of screwed it up. And by the way, the reason that when he gets on, he's probably going to be a little more irate than he typically is because this is actually the only way that he can afford his daughter's medication and the rent. Okay. Now, I'm not asking you to feel sorry for, I got 9 pictures of people that people, by the way, humans seeing human faces, just that alone can release release innate feelings of empathy, but these aren't real people. But these are real stories that are happening all the time. And the question that you need to ask yourself, that we all need to ask ourselves, is knowing these stories, and think about the last time you went to a shopping center and you were treated rude by somebody, or short shrifted by somebody working there, or whatever. When you know these stories, would you treat these people any differently if you were interacting with them? And again, just for a moment, like, think about, you have a real story that I'm sure in the last 48, 72 hours of people that you might have interacted with. And if you knew their stories, if you knew the potential suffering, the things that were going on with their lives, like, would you treat them any differently? You know, talking about the person that cuts you off driving because maybe that's a job interview that they're late for, that kind of thing. Like, do you ever, you know, is that how you think? And again, I am no saint here. I believe me, I'm a Jersey driver, right? And I can kind of get that way as well. But there is something, part of the reason that I want to talk about this, COVID exposed, I think, a release of breakthrough in terms of how we think, but it also, I think, added to some of the issues that we're struggling with today is empathy. And there truly was a study done, it was published in 2011. I've got the actual, the citing up there. But this really, when I read this, it really got me thinking, because this is in 2009. So this is college students from the 70s to basically the the early aughts, that empathy is actually not, we're not as empathetic. As human beings, literally, we survive on empathy. Infants are sharing things at like 2 years old. We are sort of born with that. But in a world that is super chock with technology, and again, I'm trying to stay off soapbox here, but the idea is we have so much information and so much data and so much going on that some of the basic interactions that we had as human beings, COVID actually took that away too. So where we interact, what we see is a steady stream of data that's kind of pumped at us, and it's getting harder in the absence of human connection and in the overabundance of information to have that empathy. So I think we all have that, and this is why this fundamental aspect of what design thinking and human-centered organizations, this is something that we really have to revisit. But in companies, it does, kind of feel like, I know we've got, I'm just looking at my time here. Companies are trying, right? Look at these things. You see these all the time, right? Is this working? It feels like, in this case, it worked for Joe, right? It seems like only when we're speaking out that like we'll actually hear back, and you get these things that feel like, we really want to make sure you feel good and it feels validating. But the only way to typically get that is by reacting to us basically blasting them on social media. The other piece, which Margaret is going to be, I'm going to apologize for her in advance about, is now what companies are doing is they're putting in big technologies like to capture that voice of the customer. These are incredibly powerful tools. However, have you had any surveys lately? Right? This is a slide that kind of feels like my life, is that I can't, before I go to the store, when I go to the store, how clean was the store? How good was the person I dealt with? We are just over surveyed. Now, this is, again, for good intent. We're asking people. But one of the biggest parts about that is, if you are exhausted by taking surveys, one of the questions I would ask is, and besides the fact of just the sheer volume of them, it's the fact that, is anybody actually doing anything with it? I can tell you, and I'm going to call them straight out, New Jersey Transit, every year I would take the transit survey when I was taking the train into the city, and I would spend hours kind of writing that stuff. And after my third time, I'm like, I don't know that there was anything different than it was before. So this isn't our fault, right? And again, we are trying, and there's just a lot of effort to try to sort of solve for this, but it's our responsibility to figure out how we can start to, infuse design thinking, human centricity back. And because we're hardwired for it, AI hasn't figured it out yet. And just as you get these opportunities to work with, again, voice of the customer systems, prototyping, testing systems, all of these things to help make a better experience, we have to also make sure that your organization is actually ready to invest in the human-centered design that actually makes that happen. Empathy is a choice. I love this quote from Brene Brown. To connect with it, I have to connect with something that I know what I'm feeling. And again, I think COVID helped us all have that collective sense of, boy, I kind of might be a different state, might be a different situation, but I know what it feels like to be a single parent and have a home full of 3 kids and not figure out how I can get my job and their education done. I'll just say empathy pays. So this isn't just a good thing to have. It absolutely is a good thing, but it does pay. And of course, you have to throw some stats up there, to which I actually respond with, it just feels a little bit odd that, we have to, I still to this day, we need to quantify empathy to even acknowledge it, right? The way that you get a company to think about it is like, you should be good to your customers. Yeah, why? Well, because if you do, then you can get this, not just because it's an inherent value to be an organization that cares about other human beings. So in the a couple of minutes we have left, this is a whole nother thing, but this is when you are incorporating customer empathy, when you are starting to invest in design thinking mindsets, you become a human-centered organization. And these are organizations that during this pandemic, notably, and I don't even know if these stats are up to, they're going to change even next year, but these I'm actually seeing. I have been in this field for a long time, and I have like every year been like, this is the year, this is the year. And this is the era of experience. There's plenty of different ways they want to sort of declare this sort of epoch. But this last year really showed, and you are starting to see, again, experience taken to the C-level in companies, huge investments in, again, technology and teams of people that do this for a living. So this is really, really exciting, and it's a great time to be in this field and pushing towards this. And just human-centered organizations, what does that mean? So again, design thinking, if you have design thinking, you have empathy, you can sort of see where this fits in, but effectively they take that empathy, they take that interaction and really by learning and co-creating with their people and experimenting that scientific method and put the humans at the center. This is the DNA of a human-centered organization. And we were going to do a survey just to kind of see, but if you take a look here, this is a maturity model. So if you were to look and say, between empathy, co-creation, and experimentation, where do you fit on this spectrum? Where does your company feel on the spectrum? I can tell you that, again, if I was to go back 5 years, there was plenty more on the left, and organizations that I would have never expected that were ready to step up: insurance companies, financial services companies, pharmaceutical companies. This is the Jersey area. Everybody's starting to wake up like, this isn't a nice to have now, this is a need to have. So if you're looking at yourself and you're like, boy, I'm a little to the left there, be part of the solution to get you more towards the right. And that's the key takeaways here. First, for you, reacquaint yourself with the empathy that is, basically you were born with. This is the things that, feeling for other people, wanting people to be happy and avoid suffering, right? Very easy, very innate. It's time that we really start to think about what that means for your customers and your employees. Figure out how you can tangibly introduce that in the ways you do business. It could be design thinking, it could be a design sprint. There's just ways you can start to model that behavior and have conversations with others in your organization that are like-minded to move towards a customer-centric organization. And then for your company, the benefits are legion: happier employees, happier repeat customers, and yes, profitable. Because what I did to end this off was to say a really, really bad poem that I'll apologize for, because however the case, in large and small ways, the customers are seeing that empathy pays. So thank you for listening. I will stop the presentation there. Wondered if anybody had any other questions. I see some Q&A up, and I haven't just been on there, but any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, we do have a couple of comments and questions that have come in. So I'll start with this one. Do you think the lack of empathy comes from the old school work ethic of leave it at the door when you get to work?
It's interesting. I think that there's no one way to nail it down. I do think there are those pieces of I think people traditionally are like, this is my work life, this is my home life. And once again, during COVID, I think what we experienced is seeing, your coworker's kid in the background, like throwing a tantrum, the dog that jumps on the thing, and the work and life balance. I think we all got a glimpse into what that is. That's definitely a piece. I also think that just generally with the model of frankly, the shareholder value that came out of the 80s has really driven it. It's about how you get price up. I think the Business Roundtable in 2018 kind of finally turned that on its head and said, let's not focus on shareholder value. If I was to say what one of the biggest reasons driving that is if we need a solution and this solution is going to help people, but it's going to take 3 quarters to do that, and we've got to report to the street in this quarter, that's what's wind up driving it. So that is being unspooled. In 2018 is when the Business Roundtable really stepped back from that. We're starting to see the knock-on effects of it's really starting to change, and that coupled with COVID, again, is what sort of accelerated that.
Great. Thanks for that question, Siobhan. We had a couple of comments about empathy, and one was that if businesses, I guess, were truly empathetic, they would ensure that the customer interaction was handled by people who were empowered and knowledgeable.
Yep. Yep. So Martin, you're absolutely right. And this is where it comes to, is that people that are the face of your company, these customer service reps, they need to be trained. They need to be enabled with systems. So they say, when I pass you over to this other person that I can't help you, that all of the information there goes over, because then that person that takes the call is like, okay, can I get your account number again? You get upset with that. But the fact is, it's not in that person's control. So again, investing in, it was Southwest Airlines was like, look, start with invest in your employees first, because your employees will take care of your customers and your customers will take care of your share price. Yeah, definitely. That's why when I asked about employee experience, I like the idea of customer empathy, but I just would like to take off the any kind of what type of person and just say empathy for employees, empathy for customers.
It's an excellent point. And in the same vein, Martin was saying that customers should have empathy for the service workers who are doing their best. They're dealing with complex situations, sometimes in a regulatory environment.
Yep.
And in some of the scenarios, quite frankly, Ronnie, that you presented, where their personal life is, bleeding into, their work interactions.
Yep. Yeah, again, employees are the most underserved human beings, but if we give them love, everybody gets love.
I think that's a great way to close things out today. So I want to thank our audience. I want to thank Ronnie for a great job, interactive and interesting presentation today. And as I stated earlier, I
smell a survey coming.
I do have a very brief, I promise, 3-question survey on today's events.
And if I did a good job, could you know? Yeah, sorry, keep going, Margaret.
But yeah, we do, I promise, look at these and we get ideas about what people would like to see in terms of topics and or speakers. So I encourage everyone to respond to that survey. And a friendly reminder to everyone that the RBS Virtual Lunch and Learn series takes place on Wednesdays at noon Eastern, specifically the third Wednesdays of each month. And we hope that's easy for you to remember because it's the middle of the week and the middle of the day. And for more information, you can always visit our webpage. We'll be emailing this information to anyone who's registered. So this is more for people who are listening to the recording. business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. And finally, as I mentioned when our webinar began earlier, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be shared via social media and emailed, and it can also be found posted on the Business Insights page of our website. So Ronnie and a fantastic audience, I thank all of you and wish you a great rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.